So this was not planned as a shiur. It's kind of viewed as an extended Q&A. I don't have source sheets because I knew that this would be evolving rapidly. So I was asked two questions in succession. The first one was by Yosef, who was asking about the first bracha in מעריב. Okay, and I'll say the second question after we go over Yosef's question. So Yosef's question was on the phrase in the first bracha in מעריב before Kriyat Asher bidvaro Ma'ariv Arvim b'chachama posech she'arim b'isvana mishnei itim u'machlif es hazmanim musader es hakochavim b'mishmir asem barakia kirtano. So you can see here, Art Scroll and Koren are very similar. Who by his word brings on evenings with wisdom opens gates, with understanding alters periods, changes the seasons and orders the stars and the heavenly constellations as he wills. Okay, and then the Koren translation says, and by his will orders the stars and their constellations in the sky. I translated it based on what I saw in the Mefarshim, blah, 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 and arranges the stars in their watches, like mishmaros are watches, like in the night, like there's what, was it 3 watches? I feel like there's 3 watches.
Long drawn out, multiple bit 3 or 4.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. I do remember that, yeah. Okay, and then arranges the stars in their watches in the firmament in accordance with his will. So I was kind of shocked that that neither Art Scroll nor Koren acknowledged rakia, like that was what was created on day 2, like it's a firmament, in accordance with his will. Okay, fine. So the question that Yosef asked was basically, we know that there are no such things as constellations. That was how he said it. Okay, and what I assumed he meant by that is constellations are. They used to think that there was a firmament that was firm, okay, and constellations were embedded in the firmament, and they were objective existences that were like up there. Hey, it's Chaim Zifkin. They used to think that these constellations were embedded in this firmament, and they were as objective in their existence as the sun and the moon, But now we know that it's just a matter of our perception, and these stars are millions of light years away, and many of them, actually I don't know which ones we can see and which ones we can't see, but like many of them, it's really their light that's reaching us, and like if you were standing in a different position, then it would be different. So the way Yosef asked the question is, why don't we change the bracha to make it more scientifically accurate? Okay, and I'm trying to preserve that way he asked the question because I want to capture the thrust of the question so you know where it's coming from, and like you can see where we're going. Okay. Now, before I share Oren's question, I want to, I think my immediate response, this is all over text, so either I posted this to the group or I said this. What's worse than this? What's worse than this is in the first bracha for Kriyat and Shachrit on Shabbos, okay? Hakel haposeach b'chol yom dalsos sharei mizrach uvokeach halone rakia motzi chama mimkoma ulevana mimchon shivta umi'ir lalam klo ulioshav shabara b'midas arachmin. The God who opens daily the doors of the gateways of the east, okay, this is Art Scroll's translation, and splits the windows of the firmament. Okay, so we know that there's no firmament, certainly doesn't have windows, okay, who removes the sun from its place and the moon from the site of its dwelling. Well, we also now know that there's no such thing as sunset and sunrise, right? That the moon and the sun, well, the moon's moving, but the sun is not moving, to rise for us. It's really the earth that's moving, right? So the question is like, how can we say this, and why don't we update that, okay? Now, if I time this perfectly, then Oren will come in as soon as I ask this question. No, okay, that would have been cool. So Oren's question was piggybacking off of Yosef's, which was like, what exactly are we allowed to change and not change, and why? Okay, like in tefilah, and he gave some examples. Like, for example, he said, could you add extra prakim to Pesukah de Zimra? Or like, I don't know if this is one of the examples, but like, tachanun, tachanunim, or like, we know you can put bakashos in tefilah. What else can you or can't you do? And then the most extreme example he mentioned is like people who modify the tefilah to make it more relatable or more in line with their sensibilities. Like, I don't know if he was referencing a specific sect of Judaism, but people who, let's say, like put the imahos in the first bracha of Shemona Esrei. Like once you're saying that you can modify tefilah in any way, where do you draw the line? Okay, so I want to focus on the first question, on Yosef's question, but I want to dip into Oren's question as much as needed in order to like establish a framework for tefilah, and then like as much as it relates to Yosef's question. The full details of Oren's question would take a more in-depth halachic analysis, which I only started but didn't have time to finish. Okay, so what's first of all, just what's your gut instinct about like why don't we change this to make it more accurate, or like why can't we change stuff in general? Yeah, or what are the parameters? Like if this were a Q&A and you were asked this, what would you
Well,
what direction would you go in?
I guess you're asking two questions.
Yeah.
Why don't we change this?
Right.
And what do you feel about changing things in general?
Right.
I don't really hear the question.
Okay.
Here's the question. Because I think Rakia, you could just interpret that as like from our perspective,
Yeah.
there's definitely a Rakia.
Right.
You know, we see the stars as this thing that covers the sky.
Right.
It's not just because, you know, from a different perspective, it's like, you know, the stars are out there in the
Right.
universe.
Right.
Like, you know, so I don't really, I think like, you know, like Hashem created the world with our world in mind, maybe,
Yeah.
arguably, I guess. And so it doesn't sound weird to me to say that he placed stars in a way where now they're going to be visible to us. In like
Yeah.
Rakia.
Okay. So let me that actually prompts me to strengthen the question with Gemaras, which I did not think of until just now. Well, actually, one's a Gemara and one is a Rambam based on a Gemara, but I don't know the Gemara well enough. So the Gemara, there's a famous Gemara when it says Hakel Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, and then it goes through the Nevi'im who like took out those phrases because they weren't true. Does this ring a bell? Like one of them said. Let me see if I can find it really quickly here.
Oh yeah, there's like a random looking video. Also.
Yeah. If I can't find it immediately, then I'm not gonna. Oh my. Okay. I think the phrase is used as "aye gevurasecha." Okay, I can't. Oh no, wait. Parsha Shas. No, I can't find it. The thrust of the Gemara was basically like, let's say, you know, one of them, and I forgot which of the terms was used, but let's say like one of them said, you know, the Gevura is in, you know, Gevura in that bracha refers to like Klal Yisrael's dominance, and like now we're in Galus and we've been destroyed, so I can't say it until he took it out, you know, and so the thrust of that Gemara was, you know, Karav Hashem l'chol karav l'chol asher yikra'uhu be'emes, right? Hashem is close to all who call out him in truth.
Right.
So if something is not true, then how can you say it? And you can say, well, I can reinterpret the phrase gadol and gibor and Nora in a different way, but like, you know, so that was one thing. And then there's another halacha about, you know, so I don't know the actual Gemara or the actual halacha in like the the Sifrei halacha, but about whether a ger is allowed to bring bikurim and say the vidui bikurim of Arami Ovid Avi V'yer Mitzrayim, etc., because he's saying, you know, his history, but it's not his history, right? If he's a ger, then this didn't happen to him, you know. So in Ovadia Hager's letter to the Rambam, this is what I do know. Then he says, he asked the Rambam, can I as a ger say Elokeinu Elokei Avosenu? You know, if you know the avos were not actually my avos. So Rambam gives an interesting thing as he's answer. He says you could change them to say Elokei Avos Yisrael, and in any bracha that references Yisrael, then you can modify it accordingly. Okay, but he says in truth, if you said Avosenu, then that would not be wrong, because when we say that the avos are our fathers, when we say Avram Avinu, we really mean like, you know, we follow after him in terms of his perfection and his ideas, and like it's as true about you as it is about anyone else, you know. So you see in his answer, like if it's false, then you wouldn't be able to say it, you know. Or let's say that's why, like, you know, I can't say as a ger the bracha of Shalosani Goy, you know, because God did make me a Goy, you know. So like there is this idea of like if we when we're only lifting Hashem in tefilah or when we're saying brachos, you know, we can't say something that's not true. You know, hey, I tried to time it so that like you would walk into this and ask a question, right? Yeah. But it's okay. Yeah. So
I have another like.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tamar.
Sorry, yeah, because you were asking for like possible answers. This isn't really like an answer, but
sure.
Like, let's say you're gonna change it.
Right.
Okay, so like how? Right.
Okay. Right.
Who's gonna do it? Is everyone
Right.
gonna change it? Is it just people who think about constellations are gonna change it? Like.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. So that gets more to the heart of, I think, one of the approaches that we're going to take. Okay. And I think the extreme way to give that answer, or to give that answer is, let's say I gave you a heter card, okay, like a get out of jail free card in Monopoly, and say, here, you could change whatever you want in tefilah, right? Question is, would it be rational to do so, even if halakhically you had carte blanche to do it, okay? And that's a separate consideration. This is why not so much with Yosef's question, but with Oren's question, this does get into, like, there's gonna be an overlapping of considerations here of what halakhically are we allowed to do. Oh, it's like that line from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so busy wondering whether they could do it, but they didn't stop to ask whether they should do it, so even if you could do it, then how or will, or like who, who's going to do it? How are you going to make that determination? Yeah.
Just an initial thought on that.
Sure.
I have had times where, like, I'll go through a tefilah or something, and I just get blown away by how articulately it was written.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like anybody who could write anything remotely close to
Yeah.
that. I always have a feeling of, like,
Yes.
that's out of my life.
Right. Now, so that's a very healthy response. However, there are people who feel exactly the opposite, which is, this is so arcane, this is so, like, hard to read, I can't relate to it. And that's where the impetus comes from, modifying stuff. And by the way, just to, someone who saw Oren's question was bothered by the example of the people adding imahos, well, guess what? Like, yeah, that might not be an orthodox thing to do, but guess what? That Shabbos tefilah I quoted from, this thing here, this was added in by Tanim. This is not from the Anshe Knesset Gedola, and Kel Adon Al Kol Maasim, that's added in by Tanim. Like, and Rambam was against that, So the question is if you object to, like, modern changes to tefilah, why aren't you up in arms about, like, all the other changes that were introduced, by Tanim or by Kabbalists, what was that?
Let's be.
Yeah, right. That's one way to go. Yeah, but so, and I'll get back to you in just a second. But then there's the question like this, which is, okay, let's say we take this hardcore, zealot stance of we don't make innovations in tefilah. Okay, well, there remains, we'll get into this a little bit in the next part. There remains the big problem, which is the Anshe Knesset Gedola, innovated we'll see that in a second. They made the tefilah, the text of the tefilah, in, like, the 500s, right? BCE, okay? Tefilah was not written down until at least Rav Amram Gaon, okay? Or in fragments from other Gaonim, until, like, the 900s. So you got a good 1400-year window where this was not written down. And by that time, there were already tons of variants. So the question is, what do you, if we had the authentic tefilah that we could go back to, then we would do it. But now the question is, so what are you going to do? Are you going to do detective work to try to figure out what's the most authentic nusach? And that's not like me and Rama Bakius here opening up my Freiburg Manuscript Society and, like, being able to look at all the manuscripts, because we don't have manuscripts from the Anshe Knesset Gedola. It was Torah Peh. Oh, so what are you going to do? You're going to make decisions based on your own mind about which version of the tefilah sounds better? It's like the people who are, who think that they can be makbid on pronunciations, of Hebrew. Yeah, right. Like we don't have the pronunciations anymore, and that's why halakhically, and there are poskim in tefilah who do this also. There is a big halakhic reason and rational reason to say you go with the minhag hamakom, because your own personal innovations are likely to be less reliable than whatever naturally trickle down, for both, for these types of things in general, for minhagim in general, for nusach, for pronunciation, for vocalization. So, in other words, the point I'm trying to make is, there is this feeling of, let's just be the zealot and go back to the authoritative things. But then, are you being more radical by saying, I'm going to rely on my own, my own take on this thing, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, Oren.
Well, a question I just thought of is that if you know that what you're saying isn't the original,
right?
Or if you're pretty confident,
right,
that what you're saying isn't the original, then why should there be any difference if you add or take away words?
Right. So that's the other question, right? Is let's say we concede that you can't actually find the original, but we know that something was innovated. Let's say we know when it was innovated, and we know that like the pre-innovation version is more likely to be accurate than the innovated one because we know it's sprung up. So Why don't we just go to,
Because we're like, so you know, the pre-innovative version of the form, like there are also like a high pronounced dollar, which pre-innovation, us today, is impossible to do it how people pronounce today.
yes and no, right? That's yet another machlokes, but maybe we'll save pronunciation for another time, right? Can Ashkenazim learn an ayin? That's a question. I've heard people say no, and then I'm like, but they can learn Arabic, and Arabic has an ayin. So like, you can't just decree because there's a custom of Ashkenazim who can't pronounce an ayin. Yeah.
I'm gonna like say the dollar is supposed to be principally, which is
Yeah.
and the how Ashkenazim do the dollar.
Right. How Ashkenazim with the dollar is not right. Yeah. Like Ibn Ezra says, it's supposed to sound like a swarm of bees. Right. Yeah.
Just another, I guess, comment really on the subject of, about like whether or not we should change tefilah or the words of tefilah, is that there is kind of this idea floating around, whether it's good or not, I don't know, but there is this like notion floating around that it's better to, or at least that a lot of people believe, that it's better to say what I actually believe,
Right.
than to say something which was given to me but that I don't feel.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So that and
that's true,
yeah, and I'm going to actually give precedent for that so I want to start answering the question, which is going to strengthen the question and make it even more understandable, especially in light of what you just said. Okay. So if you already know what I'm about to say, so this will be review, but it's good to review every once in a while. And I am consistently shocked by how many people don't know this halachically or historically. Okay. And I'm obviously not a historian. I'm relying on the Rambam here. Okay. But I'm saying like even within our sources. So the Rambam opens Hilchos Tefilah with the presentation of what the mitzvah is and how our tefilah came to be. Okay. Mitzvah to say lihis palel b'chol yom. It is a positive mitzvah to lihis palel. We'll just translate it as to daven, but literally means to judge oneself. Okay. That's my whole rant on how prayer is a bad translation, right? B'chol yom, every day. Shnemar, as it says, va'avadetem es Hashem Elokechem. You shall serve Hashem your God. All right, now again, just be aware this is a machlokas rishonim about whether tefilah is d'oraisa or not. Rambam holds it is. Ramban holds it's only d'oraisa in an eis tzara at a time of catastrophe, but he holds that the tefilah we do is d'rabanan. Okay, mipiyesh mo lamdu, from the Torah Sheba'al Peh we learn avoda zo hi tefilah, that this avoda in the pasuk and in other pasukim about avoda is tefilah. V'namar, and it says ul ovdo b'chol levavchem, you shall serve him with all your heart. Amru chachamim. Oh, so just background. When you say avoda in general, okay, without heart, what would you think avoda refers to? Korbanos, right? Or serve God. If someone just says serve God, or all mitzvahs, right? Yeah. So now you have, so that's how you would interpret it. But now you have serve God with your heart. So that's why the chachamim come in. Amru chachamim ezohi avoda shebelev. What is service of the heart or the mind? You know, remember, lev means heart or mind. Zo tefilah. That's tefilah. Okay. And then the Rambam in the Sefer Mitzvah says that's also Talmud Torah. Okay, but primary one is tefilah. Okay, but now he gets to the history. Ve'in minyan ha-tefilos min ha-Torah. The number of tefilos is not from the Torah, meaning how many times a day we daven. Ve'in mishneh ha-tefilah hazos min ha-Torah. The Mishnah, which is strange, he uses the word Mishnah. He means text. Okay, the text of the tefilah is not from the Torah. I don't know why he calls it Mishnah. I also didn't think it was Mishneh, which means like repetition. I thought it was Mishnah, teaching. Teaching would make more sense for the lashon of tefilah, but whatever. Ve'in le'tefilah zman kavua min Torah, and there's no set time for tefilah from the Torah. L'pikach nashim v'avadim chayavim b'tefilah, and therefore servants and women who are generally, who are generally exempt from time-bound positive mitzvos are obligated midoraisa lefishi mitzvos asay shelo hazman grama, because it is not a time-bound positive mitzvah. Yeah.
Why does he feel the need to say these things? There's not. It's not
yes,
from the Torah.
exactly. So
does it do about like say what the
right? So it's bothered me for a long time why the Rambam does this, because usually you don't start off the mitzvah by defining what it's not, you know, and he does immediately then go and define what it is. So I don't know if it's just in reference to the fact that he's speaking to his audience who is familiar with tefilah being like a completely different thing than what it was. I don't know. Unfortunately, there aren't enough cases of, I know of no other mitzvah d'oraisa that has evolved this much or like changed this much in form other than tefilah. Okay, you'll see in a second. So in other words, there's no other precedent to compare this to for like looking at how this changed, you know? Okay, so now what is this mitzvah? Okay, and this is the part that's going to strengthen the question. Elachiv mitzvah kachu. this is what the biblical mitzvah is. Shehe Adam mispalel umischanim b'chol yom, that a person should daven, judge himself, and supplicate every day. Okay, tachanunim means asking for things you don't deserve. Okay, so that's the overarching thing. And now, what does that mean in specific? You declare the praises of God, of the Holy One, blessed is He. Then he asks for his needs, which he needs, with requesting and supplication. Okay, and I always take that to mean you ask for your actual needs, not just your wants. Okay, that's the mitzvah. You can ask for your wants, but the mitzvah is to ask for your needs. And then he gives praise and thanksgiving to the one, to Hashem, who over the good that he has bestowed him. Each and every one according to his capacity. Okay, so bare minimum requirements once a day, and you say shavach bakasha and hoda, praise, request, thanksgiving. Now he gives a depiction of what would this look like in practice. Im haya ragil, if a person were in the custom of doing so, marbe b'tchino bakasha, he would be there's a fancy word for this, prolix, like elaborate and saying a lot of stuff in tchina bakasha. I think I saw that the first time I read this in English. Prolix in the Friedlander and the More Nevuchim. The im haya aros of Saim, if he was of circumcised lips, meaning that he had a hard time formulating his thoughts, okay, or he had a literal speech impediment. Medaber k'fi yachlo uvchol eshirte. He would speak, meaning he would formulate his tefilah according to his ability at any time he wanted. Same thing with the number of tefillos. Each one according to his ability. Some would daven once a day. Some would daven many times a day. Everyone would daven facing the base of Mikdash wherever he was. And that's how things were from Moshe to Ezra, which again is from 1312 BCE until 512 BCE, or when I don't know the exact year. Okay, but like a good 800 years. Okay, so you see from here, in terms of the thing you were saying, the original Deoraisa is as long as you're doing it once a day and praising God, requesting from God, and thanking God, you say it in your own formulation however you want, you know? So whatever answer we say restricts that. Like a person could say, well, I'm going back to the original Deoraisa, you know, like why should I limit myself to like what's in the siddur? You know, I should say it the way that I feel. Yeah.
There's also assuming that then in that mix are going to be people that are not that particular. What you're saying about the other
right.
That person's going to have like.
Right. So the interesting thing is, on the one hand, that's true that person's not going to have a good tefilah. On the other hand, the Torah still entrusts him with it, yes. Right? Which is interesting that, like, you know, and we're going to see that the Torah does not, once we make this change, does not trust anybody with it. Okay. Okay.
He also, it also says each person according to their ability.
Yeah. Right.
So that kind of goes against it.
Oh, right.
Even if somebody
that's a good point.
Won't be able to do it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
According to their ability.
Right. Meaning that it's not just that they're allowed to do it according to their ability. The Rambam implies that is the design of the mitzvah. You know, like as an example of this, there's only one other mitzvah I can think of where you're supposed to do it according to your own ability and formulation. Deoraisa. That is true, but that's not. There's no idea of articulating something, right? I'll give you a hint that you would know. Oh yeah, tomorrow.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was tzedakah like that?
So tzedakah is also, you're right, that's not defined according to Torah. I'm saying according to a formulation of verbalization. Okay, I'll give you a hint. I just heard a rumor about this from your household. I heard.
Yeah.
Was that?
I don't know.
Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. I heard your dad put on a puppet show.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. So Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Rambam uses the same phrase as kfi tzachos lashon hamasaper, that you're supposed to say it according to your own formulation based on your own son, you know. And then the Haggadah only came in later, basically as like a backup plan for people who don't know how to do it on their own, you know. Yeah. Now there might be more mitzvahs than that, but those are the ones that I know of. Yeah, it's all this year. Yeah.
It
Well,
sounds actually also very similar though, in each part of this formulation of there was like an original.
yes. Yeah.
And then-
That's also true. You're right. When I said that there's no other mitzvah that has gone through so much change, I guess the close second is the Sibri Tzitz Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it also has now come to being like a set kavanah.
Right. That's also true. Right. Okay. So now let's talk about the change. Okay. Kavan Shagalu Yisrael b'mei Nebuchadnezzar HaRasha. Once Israel became exiled in the days of Nebuchadnezzar HaRasha, Nisarvu Befaras V'yavan Ushar Umos. Then they became assimilated. The Jews became assimilated. There's no way. Why did I think this year was going to be 45 minutes? Okay, they became that's fine. That's fine. They became assimilated into Persia and Greece and other nations. Okay, V'noldu lahem banim ba'artzos hagoyim, and they had offspring in those lands of the nations. The osan habanim, and those children nisbalbu asfasan. Their language became mixed up. Okay, a little Migdal Bavel reference there. And the language of each and every one of them became mixed in with many other languages. The Kavan Shai Medaber, and when one of them would speak, he wouldn't be able to speak all of his needs, to articulate all of his needs in one language. Rather, it was all in a mixture, a confusion. Shnemar, as it says, it says in Nehemiah that their children half spoke Ashdodis, which is some language, and they didn't know how to speak Jewish. Okay, I guess they started calling it Yehudis because was when Shevet Yehuda was already a distinct thing. That's when we started being called Jews.
It's also called out like a Sefer Malachim, where we go to. Calling to the Ethereum, we understand you're big. You don't need to speak of who this.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. And same thing with every nation. Do you have a question, Isaiah?
No.
Okay. All right. Yeah, fine. Right. So that's the problem. Okay. The problem is that they became assimilated and their language got mixed up. And then he says, and because of that, when one of them would daven, Tiksar Lashono, Lishol Chafatzav, Olahagi Shevach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Balashon HaKodesh, his language would be too deficient to ask for his needs, his desires, or to say the praises of God in Lashon HaKodesh, Achi Arav Ima Lashon HaSacheros, without there being mixed in other languages. Okay, that was the problem. The Kamen Shira Ezra Obeistino Kach, and once Ezra and his Beis Din saw that this was such, Amdu v'tiknu lahem shmona esrei brachos al seder. They arose and they made 18 brachos in order. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they have just done some very simple, like each person, since they said we know that the right thing is for them to do it according to their ability.
Yeah.
So they should just do it in Lashon HaKodesh according to their ability, if it was small ability.
That's a good question. Right.
18, which seemed harder, honestly.
Right.
18 brachos, unless there was some sort of expectation that they would have been doing something along.
Correct. So the one question, which is a factual historical question, I don't know the answer to, how bad was their language? You know, when we say that they had a mix of language, like I know many people who, like, you know, can, if you ask them, say all the Hebrew words, you know, okay, they'll say a bunch of Hebrew words. Okay. Actually, no, we didn't have to get that far. There are a lot of like, let's say like Bali Tshuva, right, who were not raised with halacha or with davening, and like they just couldn't even string together a basic thing, you know, like, so it might be that dire back then. I just don't know that they wouldn't even be able to like and enough people were like that they couldn't even do the basic mitzvah d'oraisa. That could be. Now, yeah.
Why does that even matter?
Okay, good. Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, okay. Couldn't you just pray in any language?
Okay, good. I was hoping someone would ask that. Okay.
Later source, but like Gemara says you can pray in any language. There's a machloket about which language you can pray in.
All right, right.
I don't think any of the sides say it's only Hebrew.
Okay, so yeah.
Why didn't they use it from the beginning also?
So that question we can answer, which is that apparently God, and okay, we'd have to like talk about this. God wants you to do it in your own formulation, right? Like, and if you think about what the act of tefilah is, you know, if you've heard my shiur on tefilah, where I talk about like what tefilah is, you know, it is a very personal introspection where you are like reflecting on your relationship with God and what your needs are, and like it would really like, I mean, it is a huge disadvantage to block the flow of your own personal expression. Like, you know, and you look at like the way that you know, the terms we use for tefilah, sicha, right? which is conversation or like pouring out your heart, you know, like it really is like a very personal, like subjective, changing by the day thing. Yeah, David.
Yeah, you took out my question.
Oh, okay, yeah, meaning like
That this bringing in everything Rahon, having a set of Rahon,
yeah.
and then is taking away that person.
Yeah, right. It's taken away, and so one might also even wonder, how can you be Yotze the Doraisa with this? Okay, but yeah, no, but the Doraisa is still, you still are Yotze because this is according to your ability, and like you still are saying Shavah B'kasha and Hoda'a. Yeah.
Is it possible that, like, it seems like what you're saying is changing day by day? People who know a good amount, they would want to express like certain, like maybe complex ideas about their Shabbat to Hashem.
Yeah.
And then if those people, like even Chachamim, didn't have much Hebrew, it would kind of make sense that at that point you would need to institute something for people like that.
Right. Yeah. I guess just one thing also to keep in mind is that it seems like they were treating this as a national problem that needed a uniform solution. And that has to be kept in mind also. Yeah.
Well, why? I mean, why wouldn't
Right.
they, why wouldn't this be like a city every kind of thing? Or
Right.
Like that? Like, if you can't speak in Hebrew.
Right. And
don't
that's,
do this.
and that is what we do with the Haggadah. Now the Haggadah developed after the Sanhedrin was able, so like you could argue that with the Haggadah they couldn't make a universal decree that would be binding on everyone, but that is what they did, is at least according to the Ritva. Excuse me. Then he says basically like, if you can say this Mitzrayim on your own, do it, and if not, like use the Haggadah, you know. But let me just ask your prior question from the Rambam himself. Okay, look at the Rambam's psak in Hilchos Brachos Perek Aleph Halacha Hey. The Nusach Kol Brachos. So the text of all the brachos, Ezra Ubeis Din. Oh, sorry, that's jumping the gun. This is what I want to say. I know we're going out of order. Kol brachos kula nemarim b'chol lashon. All the brachos can be said in any language. V'hu sheyomar inyan shetignu chachamim. That's as long as you say it according to the content that was dictated by the chachamim. Okay. Of imshina es hamatbea, but if you change the formula, hoil v'hizkir askar umalchus v'inyan habracha v'afilu b'lashon chol. Then as long as you mentioned God's name, his kingship, and the subject of the bracha, even in a secular language, yata, then you're yote. So the classic example in the Gemara is if instead of saying Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamotzi lach min haaretz, you said Baruch Rahmana Malka de Alma Mara Dehai Pita. Okay, if you say blessed is the master of the world, or sorry, is the Rahmana is the merciful one, master of the world, and of this bread, or something like that, right? I forgot the exact lashon, you know. So then you still are yotze, even though you're not allowed to do it. But the reason I'm bringing this in is, even according to the Rambam, davening in other languages is totally fine. Okay, and this is not just brachos; it's also tefilah itself.
I mean, then it sounds like the problem wasn't the language.
Good.
Then it sounds like it was the content.
Okay, good.
If that's the case, then why would that pasuk from the family be distorted from it?
Okay.
Because that pasuk talks about their language, not about their ability to formulate ideas.
Okay, good.
Their ability to speak.
Good. All right, good. You're anticipating the next steps. You have a question?
Still, I guess with like the thing you just said about the bread.
Yeah.
It's a little bit dangerous. Like a person might think they know the ending of the bracha that Chazal intended.
Yeah.
But they might not, like
right.
You know.
Okay, good. So we'll definitely get back to that also. Yeah, that's definitely part of the problem. So let me just answer the question now before we go on, and it's going to be in line with what Oren said, which is that the problem is not the language. Okay, so this is my own understanding, and like I haven't seen this expressed anywhere, but I'm convinced that this is true. So if you have valid disproofs, then please show them to me, because I've been under this assumption for a long time. So languages are a reflection of the ideas and values of the culture that produced and uses the language. Okay, so like the probably now regarded as racist idiom is Eskimos have 50 words for snow, right? If you want to make it not racist, you could say skiers have 50 words for snow, which is also true, right? Or if you want not controversial thing, not even insulting skier, that wasn't an insult, but like if you know anyone who is a painter, or maybe I guess in clothing, they know all the precise names for all the different colors, right? Whereas for me, like if you ask what's the difference between that blue and this blue and that blue, I'd be like lighter, darker, you know? So why is that? Because in a world of snow, in a world of ice, then there becomes a need to distinguish between different types of snow, different types of ice, you know? and so the vocabulary arises from that, or in in France, apparently, like where there's a strong, long culinary culture of like refined chefs. They have a lot of different words for culinary things, So Hebrew's called Lashon HaKodesh, right? So it has different features. So one feature is it's the language of Chachma. Another feature is it's the language of Kedusha, right? The language of Kodesh. And anyone know Rambam's explanation of why it's Lashon HaKodesh? Just to give an example of this.
The one that says it doesn't have any words for sexual.
Yeah. So it has 0 words for anything sexual or bodily functions. Okay, Rambam disagrees and says no, that there are words in Hebrew that have that, and he says it's a different thing. But in other words, all the Hebrew words for those things are euphemisms. Okay, why? Not because there's a taboo, but because these should not be subjects of conversation. They should only be referred to for practical needs or halakhic needs or whatever. So we only use euphemisms for sexual functions, anatomy, bodily, bodily waste, excretory stuff, So that's in the Jewish culture. In English, there's lots of words for those things because people have like especially in modern English, is the society is permeated with romantic sexual values and ideas, and there's no philosophy against that. So my contention is like this: there might be a problem. I mean, you could argue that there's a problem with the fact that we're losing Lashon HaKodesh, but the problem with the davening is not the other language. It's that foreign ideas and values were creeping in to their tefillos, okay, both in regards to their needs and in regards to God. And I'll give you a couple examples, and these are my own examples that you can argue with the examples, but I'm just going to say them because I think they're good. So let's say, for example, if you in English ask for wealth. So in Western American society, what are you asking for? To get rich, lots of money, right? But if you in Hebrew, in the culture of Chazal, ask for osher or to be an ashir, what is Judaism's take on wealth?
It's like what you need and be able to learn.
Sameach v'chalko, right? Yeah, right. I mean, you're right also, right? But is you ashir sameach v'chalko? So think about this. Okay, think about a guy who is in Babylonian society, okay, and I don't know what their concept of wealth was, but says, like, make me wealthy, right? And he's using the word wealth in Aramaic, tainted by the values of Bavel, So he's actually, not only is he asking for a different thing, he's conceiving of it in a different way that is not connected to the Jewish values of Asher being Sameach B'chalko, Or if you talk about God, like, let's say, for example, okay, this is not, I think I had examples about God. Okay, I'll give a bad example. Okay, I'll give a bad example. We refer to God as Melech, okay? Melech HaOlam. Now, in most places in society throughout history, they were familiar with kings, okay? We in America don't have a king, So the closest thing that we can associate God to is either some fantasy-based notion of a king that we get from fiction, and imagination, or the president. Neither of those is adequate, So our concept of king is tainted by our society, and in other cases, it is sometimes it ends up being the opposite of what the actual meaning is, Now this is not a word from tefilah, but let's say, for example, an example I like to give is just because it's from the Rambam, is emunah, right? So you ask the average English speaker how to translate emunah, and what's the most common translation that they say? Faith, right? So faith, if you understand it again in the Christian sense that most people are exposed to, it means belief without sufficient evidence or reason. Now the Rambam's definition of emunah in the Mor Nevuchim 150, Arabic word itikad, is conviction in something on the basis of reason and evidence. So emunah is opposite, if you translate it as faith, from what it actually is going to the Rambam. So the problem is that these ideas become tainted by the culture that you're in, and then and then that bleeds into the words. Okay, so what did they do is they made, so he says they made, this is the last paragraph here. So they made the 13 brachos al seder. Now the Rambam elsewhere, elsewhere says that they made all the brachos, okay, not just the Shmona Esrei. And if you look in the Rav Makbili edition, he says it's not really all the brachos, because certain brachos were made after Ezra, but the majority of brachos they made. Okay, but certainly they made the Shmona Esrei. So let's look at this last paragraph here.
Wait,
Yeah.
question on what you said, but then why does the Rambam say that you can say?
Oh, we'll get to that in a second,
Okay.
or after today. We'll see how much time we get. Shalosh Rishonos, the first three brachos Shevach Lashem are praise to God. But Shalosh Achronos Hodaya, the last three are thanks. Also not quite true, right? Yeah. Were we talking about this recently? Yeah. The Emsayos and the middle brachos, Yesh behen she'elas kol hadvarim shein kamo avos l'kol chefte ish ve'ish u'letzarchei hatzibur kulan. The middle brachos contain the requests for things which are like the primary categories of the desires in each and every person and the needs of the community as a whole, right? So in the middle 13 brachos, the first 7 or 6 are for like individual personal needs, and then the other ones are for communal needs. Okay, why? So what's the purpose? Is Kadeshi Yihu Aruchos B'Fia Kol, so that they should be arranged in the mouths of everyone. V'yilmadu Osan B'Mehira, and they can learn them quickly. The Tihye Tfilas Elu Ha'ilgim, Tefila Shlema Ketfilas Bal Halashon Hatzacha. That's like what you were saying, is that the tefillah of these stammerers, meaning people who are inarticulate, can be a perfect tefillah like the most eloquent davener, okay? Like the most eloquent speaker. And because of this, tiknu kol brachos v'tefilos haseduros b'fi kol Yisrael. They established all of the tefilos and brachos that are arranged in the mouths of all of Israel. Kadeshi he kol inyan bracha aruch b'fi ha'ilek, so that the subject or the content of each bracha would be arranged in the mouth of the stammerer. Okay, so they made all the brachos, and then he then goes on to explain what else they did. They set up 3 tefilos a day on weekdays, and an extra one on on days with a musaf, and then an extra one on the Eila. They made all the halachos of tefillah, of like all of the bowings, and it's always a fun thought experiment to imagine like Tchias Mesim happens, okay, and like Moshe Rabbeinu was around outside, and like some guy pulls him in for a minyan, and he's like, "Oh, what?" and they hand him a siddur, and he looks at it, he goes, "Oh, what?" And then they daven, and they're all saying stuff. Moshe Rabbeinu would be more lost than the average irreligious Jew, because at least the irreligious Jew nowadays knows what Kaddish is, but like Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't even know the concept of like minyan and like brachos, and so like it's just such a radical departure from the original model, Now I realize that there are a bunch of problems that we didn't answer and that are remaining, but just to point out, I forgot what I'm answering. I feel like I'm answering little bits of everything here. There is an idea here that he's saying that there was not a democratization, a uniformization. There's probably a better word than that. A making uniform of tefillah, where they didn't just say, you can use this as a crutch. They made it that even the most eloquent people who daven no longer have the right to make up their own tefillos. They made it, everyone has to say these tefillah. Standardization, that was the word I was looking for, right? They standardized tefillah. Well, first of all, that's what they did. But he does say,
According to the Rambam, from what we've read, did they make it that you?
No, that's this last halacha. This is the last halacha we'll read tonight.
Oh.
V'nosach kol brachos, the formulation of all the brachos means the text. Ezra Beistin Tiknum, Ezra and his Beistin established. V'ein roy l'shanosan, it is not proper to change it. V'lo lahosif al achas mehen, and not to add on to it. V'lo ligroa mimen, and not to detract from it. V'chol hameshane mimatbeh shetavu chachamim b'brachos eno ela to'eh, and anyone who changes from the literally matbeh means coin, but it means like the set text of tefillah that the chachamim made is only making a mistake. Okay, and he says v'chol bracha she'en b'hazkar shemu malchus ain't a bracha. Any bracha that doesn't have God's name and kingship is not a bracha. El imkin haisa smukh l'chaverta. Now, I want to point out, just as setting up for next time, he says you're not allowed to change it or to add or subtract. And then he says, and anyone who does change it is only making a mistake. Right. So I want to say from that that's acknowledging the 2 layers here, that there's a halachic isser to change it. And then if you do change it, not only are you violating halacha, you're also making an actual mistake. Ram does not say that for other mitzvahs. He doesn't say, like, let's say he's going through the halachos of korbanos. Here's how you do the korban, and anyone who changes it is making a mistake. Here's how you pick up lulav, and anyone who changes it is making a mistake. Mistake means that there's an actual error in the way you're relating to tefillah or in what you're doing. So bleeding eder. Next time, what I'd like to do is, so this is set up the framework now. Okay. Next time, which would probably be Thursday, gives me more time to work on the next Berkat of Tehillim because God knows I need it. Then we will try to answer the questions about of Yosef and Oren, and then like also try to explain like what were the kוהנים doing when they did this, and like what is the difference between tefilah then and now in terms of perfection, like how like we relate to it, and maybe by that time I started compiling a bunch of stuff from from Emerson, but also from the Rambam Shilos and Chuvas. About there's 3 Chuvas where he talks about what you can and can't change, l'chadchila and b'diavad. And I think that'll also be good to go through. Yeah. Okay. Let's stop here for tonight. Oh, sorry. Just saying, if there are more questions on this topic, send them to me, preferably before Thursday night, so I can like prepare this. And obviously this is a big topic, and it'll be interesting to go through it, and and just see where it takes us. Okay. Have a good night. Oh, and speaking of this, like when Yosef asked the question, he said constellations aren't real. I said neither is night. Right? There's no such thing as night in from an astronomical perspective. It's only it's as real as constellations. From our perspective, there's day and night, but there's no day and night in reality. Yeah. So, haha. All right. Okay.